On today's episode, we discuss the top prospect performances of the past week and wonder whether Jake O'Brien is a top 5 caliber prospect in the 2025 NHL Draft.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian Hyatt, the USHL scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we're going to be breaking down an article that's been posted over at eliteprospects.com that will be linked in the description down below, written by my good friend and colleague, Hadi Kalakesh, discussing the top 5 prospect performances of the past week. And in the first segment, we're going to be diving into the game of Jake O'Brien of the Brantford Bulldogs in the OHL, who's been really making a push into the top 10 and even top 5 discussions for the 2025 NHL Draft. Then in the second segment, we'll be talking about 2 prospects we've already discussed a little bit this week, and that's Dustin Wolf and Cole Hutson, who have just been so strong in their recent performances. So we're going to attack their profiles from different angles than we did in previous episodes this week. And in the final segment, we'll be wrapping up the show by talking a little bit about Justin Carbonneau, another 2025 NHL Draft prospect who I got to watch live last weekend, as well as Ryder, Ritchie, who was selected by the Minnesota Wild in the second round of last year's draft, who's been playing some really solid hockey in the WHL in recent weeks. But that's today's show. But before we're going to jump into the entire thing, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So let's highlight Jake O'Brien here first and foremost, because he has been on an absolute tear. In his last 10 games, he has 6 goals and 21 points. This is a 6'2", 170-pound right shot centerman. He's a June 16th, 07 birthday. So this is a player who is decently tall, but still pretty lanky and has a lot of growing room in terms of his physicality, which will make NHL teams very, very excited in terms of the developmental runway this player still has in terms of habits and abilities he can still add into the already very standout game that he has. And on top of that, as a June 16th birthday, he's very young for this draft class. He has a lot of runway in terms of his age as well, comparative to many of the other players that are going to be available in this range of the draft. And that makes him also an extra intriguing player who has been able to really just dominate the play in terms of play driving and playmaking for the Brantford Bulldogs this season. 32 goals and 93 points in 62 games. The scoring has been fantastic. He sits third in points behind Nick Lardis and Patrick Thomas. Patrick Thomas is an older player in the OHL who has 102 points. He's a Capitals draft pick, and he's also a 20-year-old player, so one of the older players on the team. And Nick Lardis is having a historic season, having scored 70 goals, is just, I believe, the 3rd player in the last 25 years in the OHL to have done that. John Tavares was one of them, I believe, but there aren't many players in OHL history who've done what Nick Lardis has done, and a lot of that goal scoring has been enabled by Jake O'Brien's playmaking, especially on the power play. O'Brien is such a creative puck handler, really, really, really accurate playmaker. I've seen him just connect on passes through 3 or 4 defensive sticks like they're nothing there, and he's a guy that with his deception, with his intelligence, is really manipulative, is able to drag defenders out of position, put pucks underneath sticks, through skates. He doesn't need big openings to make defenses pay, and that's been evident all year long now in Brantford, and he's just been accelerating the pace offensively. And it is also a guy who just recently, on Saturday, was a big part of a dominant 11-3 victory over the Saginaw Spirit, the reigning Memorial Cup champs, who may be even better this season than they were last year. And they lost 11-3 to the Brantford Bulldogs. And in that game, Jake O'Brien scored a hat trick and added 2 assists for a 5-point performance. It was a really complete display. Constantly showing the passing and playmaking ability, and also being relatively pragmatic in terms of when space did constrict around him, just playing the simple play, dumping the puck in rather than being the source of a turnover, constantly flashing high-end deception and a bunch of vision. There's a lot of projectable elements in the playmaking, but the defensive game is still pretty raw. The physical habits, the engagement, the reads still need some work defensively, but that rawness translates to a lot of growth potential with this player. In terms of top 10 upside, I think there's definitely a lot to look at with this guy in terms of the very, very clear top 6 playmaking upside, the high-end intelligence, those deceptive qualities, the runway, both physically and in terms of age. I think there's so much to like with this player, and he's just been fantastic over the recent stretch. And in the article over at Elite Prospects, Hattie wrote about Jake O'Brien that the combination of borderline elite playmaking and physical runway offers an alluring package for NHL teams, especially the ones that trust their ability to help prospects put on muscle. If he manages to add 30 healthy pounds over the next 4 years, he'll be a phenomenal NHLer. And I fully agree with this sentiment that Hattie wrote in the article, because these flashes of elite level talent and creativity, the ability to match in terms of mental pace and offensive thinking players like Nick Lardis, who is having, as I said, a historical campaign, says a lot about a player like Jake O'Brien. Of course, the production does come with a bit of an asterisk of being inflated, but he hasn't been playing all of his 5-on-5 minutes with the most elite players there in Brantford all year. So he's been doing a lot of that production, driving his own offense as well. And even when he is playing with players like Nick Lardis, he is very much the spark of the playmaking, of the creation on that line, and doesn't have that raw finishing ability that Lardis does, but still his shot has come a long way this season. I've really liked how he's been able to use his playmaking as an ability to open up shooting threats and shooting lanes for himself as well, and being able to make defenders bite one way or the other. He's been really adaptable in my viewings, even though the playmaking certainly does shine the brightest. I think the goal scoring is probably above average as it currently is, and definitely has runway to grow beyond that too, with how intelligent he is, and just how well his handling and playmaking and intelligence work together. So certainly Jake O'Brien is a player to pay attention to. He's a guy I'm going to be doing a full in-depth scouting report on in the coming weeks. He's definitely one of the next ones on the checklist for the Prospect Spotlight series. So keep your eyes tuned for that. But I'd love to hear from you, the listeners, what your thoughts are on Jake O'Brien as a prospect. If you've been able to watch him, if you've just been able to read scouting reports of how he plays the game, what's your takeaway? What do you think that this player could offer at the NHL level? What is the ultimate upside? Do you see like potential first line NHL upside here? Because I definitely think it's there. The raw potential and the elite skill that is on Flash, I think, could elevate him to that kind of role. But the likelihood of that, I think, remains a little bit the question mark at this stage. But he's rising for good reason, and definitely a top 10 player on my board at this moment in time. So that wraps up this first segment. In the next one, we'll be moving on with Dustin Wolf, who's been just dominating the NHL with the Calgary Flames in goal, and Cole Hutson, who just continues scoring and scoring and scoring in the NCAA, just picking up the reins from his older brother Lane at Boston University, playing a very similar role and playing similarly massive minutes there this campaign. But first, a quick message from our sponsors. You just realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a real setback. That's exactly where Indeed sponsored jobs come right in handy. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and can save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can just use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, let's keep this episode rolling in the second segment by talking about a pair of prospects that I'm sure you listeners are already more than familiar with and that we talked about already this week. And kicking it off with Dustin Wolf, goaltender with the Calgary Flames, who has been the dark horse in the Calder race all season long and really should be getting more merit and more props in that competition than he's gotten so far this season, putting up a .915 save percentage in the NHL this year. He's been also among the top 5 or top 10 goaltenders league-wide in goals saved above expected this season. Overall, just bringing really, really reliable performances in net, which he capped off with the game that I caught as well, which was a 1-0 shutout over the Montreal Canadiens the other night for the Calgary Flames. Made 26 saves and was just the image of composure and control. Montreal never really felt like they got a footing in terms of creating something that seemed overly dangerous for Dustin Wolf. And he's also, I mean, this season sitting 7th league-wide in save percentage. Save percentages have really dipped in recent seasons. It's not long ago that a .915, .917 was near average for the league, but it is no longer the case, and it is now a standout to be in that conversation. He's tied as well, actually, with Darcy Kemper, so give him tied for 6th league-wide in save percentage, and that's even counting Levi Meralainen, who's only played 12 games, who's at a .925. So if you eliminate him, there you go. He's up to tied for 5th league-wide in save percentage. There's been so much to like with Dustin Wolf's game. He's just so intelligent. Calgary Flames fans can attest to this. Just constantly in the right position and has a real air of control over the game, I find. Consistently making the right decisions, is able to slow the game down when that's what his team needs, but is also able to move the puck back faster if he thinks that his team can go off the break, and a player that I think has more than deserved the opportunities he's getting in the NHL now. And I'm so glad to see him not just doing well, but absolutely excelling from the get-go here in his rookie campaign. Last year, he played 17 games with the Calgary Flames, putting up an .893 save percentage. I like what I saw there last season as well. I mean, like the positive traits have been apparent in his game going back to his draft year when he was drafted in the 7th round, falling way further than he should have. This was after a year where he played in 61 games for the Everett Silvertips, putting up a .936 save percentage. If he were any taller than 6 feet, he would have definitely been a top 3 or top 2 round guy. But he's not, and thus he fell, and the Calgary Flames benefited. And he's going to be at the center of their core for a very long time. And I'm curious to see what kind of contract they're able to lock him up for once he's up next. I don't think it's all that long until his contract is due. Yeah, so he's able to get an extension this season already in the offseason as of July 1st. If Calgary wants to work on that, he has one more year left on this current deal, paying him $850,000 against the cap. After that, I think that it's a pretty good chance that he's he's going to be earning a whole lot more money than that entry level type of money that he's currently making. And yeah, overall, just been fantastic for the Calgary Flames. And Flames fans in the comments, please let me know what your thoughts have been of Dustin Wolf. You can just leave your ranting love of Wolf down below, because he's a player that I've loved to watch for a very long time. I think he's a very entertaining goaltender, but also one who's able to kind of straddle the line of entertaining while also just being so composed and stabilizing for the team, which I think is good for the team, but the fans can still get the excitement, because the desperation ability for Dustin Wolf is certainly a benefit, even though he isn't the biggest goaltender. The athleticism, the intelligence, the anticipation in those situations just has consistently led to brilliant moments. But more than anything, it's been consistency this campaign for Dustin Wolf. But let's move on now to Cole Hutson of Boston University, selected at 43rd overall by the Washington Capitals just under a year ago in Las Vegas. He's a 5'10", 165-pound left shot defenseman who's just absolutely taken over Boston University this season, taking the reins from his brother Lane Hutson, who is now moving on to lighting up the NHL and competing with Dustin Wolf in that Calder race, whereas Cole Hutson is now one of the most dynamic already defensemen in the entire college ranks, having put up 12 goals and 39 points in 33 games this season. One of the things I've always loved about Cole Hutson is just the utter deceptiveness and evasiveness at the blue line, at the offensive blue line, in terms of generating entries. He was one of the biggest entry generating machines in the entire draft class last season, such a specialist at doing that. And another thing, building on similar tools that enable that in terms of that shiftiness, the handling, the quick twitch wrists, the quick feet, is that in terms of retaining possession in the offensive zone, Hutson is so regularly the outlet to calm things down. When pressure mounts too high in the offensive zone on the cycle, throw the puck back in Cole Hutson's direction, and he's going to calm things down, recycle the puck, and you're going to get another offensive chance in no time. He was doing that all season long in the NTDP last year, and he's been just utterly dominant in that facet so far at the NCAA level with Boston University. Just over the past couple of games, he's scored 3 points in his last 2 games, in each of them. So 6 points in 2 games there, scoring a goal and 2 assists in each of them. And he's just consistently making a massive difference in the offensive zone with quick shoulder fakes. He plays a little bit like Lane Hutson on puck in terms of that mobility, that evasiveness, that playmaking generation through his feet, through his hands, and just constantly looking cross seam for dangerous passing opportunities. But he's also brought a really good goal scoring toolkit this season. I've loved what he's done in terms of working on his shot in the past year. He's added a lot more weight behind it. He's also shooting a lot more for rebounds and tips, but inadvertently, or not so much perhaps, has also been getting a lot more goals as a result of this training. Some of those tips going off defender sticks instead, so he's getting credit for those goals. And overall, he's just been playing a really dynamic offensive game. Still a player I think has a lot of room to grow in terms of his defensive side. He has a decent defensive stick. He can match footwork quite well. In terms of mobility, he probably has a leg up over Lane Hutson in terms of the fluidity with which he moves, but the actual efficiency of getting from A to B, the speed of getting from A to B is a lot less choppy, but it's also less quick than it is with Lane Hutson. So still some runway in terms of the skating with Cole here. And as a June 28th, 06 birthday, also one of the younger players in that 2024 NHL draft class. So he's projecting wonderfully at this stage. And I do think he's going to have perhaps 1 or 2 more hurdles to making the jump to the NHL than Lane Hutson did. So I don't know if he's going to be a top 2 or top 4 defenseman out of the gate as a D+3 defenseman when he makes the jump and signs his ELC. I don't think that should be the expectation here from the Washington Capitals perspective, but still a player who's growing by leaps and bounds, scored 7 goals and 17 points in his last 10 games, has just been pure domination there at Boston University. and a whole bunch of fun to watch. If you haven't been able to check him out yet and watch him play, he's one of the more fun blue liners across the entire college ranks. So can definitely recommend that. But that wraps up the second segment here for us. In the final one, we'll be talking about Justin Carbonneau of the 2025 NHL Draft class, as well as Ryder Ritchie, who's picking up steam in the WHL in his D+1 campaign after the Minnesota Wild picked him at 45th overall. All that and more after these messages from our sponsors. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, let's wrap up the show here in the final segment, kicking it off with the prospect I got to watch live just under a week ago, and that's Justin Carbonneau of the Blainville-Boisbriand Armada in the QMJHL. He's a 6'1", 192-pound right shot right winger, and there's so much to like with his tools. His tools are standout, honestly. They remind me a little bit of Trevor Connolly in terms of the dynamic upside. Really heavy, accurate, potent release, 6.5 grade on the EP grading scale in terms of the shooting threat. Really, really dangerous, above average NHL projection on the shot. The handling, also above average NHL projection. The playmaking, likewise. The skating is powerful and smooth. There's so much to like on that side. And even physically, this is a player that can play with real pace and motor and a physical edge. He has a lot of weight on his frame at nearly 200 pounds already at 6'1", and he can leverage that power. But consistency has been a real question mark. But that hasn't stopped him from absolutely lighting up the scoring charts in the QMJHL. He has 46 goals and 87 points in 59 games this season, which is top for his team. It is all the way up at second in the league in terms of points and second in the league in terms of goals as well. He's been a standout league-wide in terms of production, but having watched him live and having watched it with Hadi Kalakesh, who is the QMJHL scout at Elite Prospects, it was not one of his stronger games of the season, as was reminded to me multiple times throughout the game. But still, I had some key takeaways from how he played. The production is clear. 9 goals, 17 points in his last 10 games. He even scored a goal in the game I watched, and it was off a wicked heavy release. But there's an underlying bunch of question marks there in terms of the consistency of engagement. He would disappear for shifts on end. It took about 13 or 14 minutes into the first period to even realize that he was playing in this game. Both of us were wondering if he was somehow like a late exclusion from the lineup, but nope, he was on the ice. Wasn't playing all that many shifts earlier on in the game, but we missed the ones where he was on the ice because he just wasn't getting all that involved. But later on in the game, had a couple shifts with standout intensity, really good like little stick lift, getting underneath the opponent, driving the middle of the ice, using his hard shot to get pucks on net, but only ended up hitting the target twice in that game. Other games over the past week included a 9 shot on goal and a 6 shot on goal performance. So certainly a player that gets a lot of pucks through traffic, but wasn't quite the case in the one I caught live at least. But still, this is a player with distinct offensive capabilities, a bunch of runway. I think very clear top 15 prospect in the 2025 NHL draft because the top 6 upside is really clear in terms of tools alone. The runway is something that has a lot of question marks, but with a team that is patient in development, is able to nurture the decision-making habits and help those grow and foster over the coming seasons, Carbonneau has 70-plus point NHL upside. There's a lot of skill here, a lot of high-end traits in the offensive side of things, and even some basis for a power game at the next level. But the soft skill, the mobility, the speed, all these things, when they work in tandem, are a joy to watch. So certainly one of the more intriguing prospects of the draft class, where I can certainly understand why certain people would have him ranked 25th overall, and why others have him ranked 9th, because the tools could have him in that top 10, but the habits could have him outside the top 20. So certainly a player who's an intriguing storyline, but whose recent play has been very, very strong there in Blainville. But to wrap up the show here, the final prospect we want to talk about for the episode is Ryder Ritchie of the Minnesota Wild, playing in Medicine Hat in the WHL this season. He's a 6'1", 185-pound right shot right winger who's an August 3rd, 06 birthday. So one of the younger players from the last year's draft class. And he has scored 28 goals and 59 points in 49 games this season. But so much of that scoring has just come in the past month or so. In his last 10 games, he has 7 goals and 17 points. The scoring has really been ramping up here recently and included a 5-point performance against the Red Deer Rebels here on a recent very, very hot streak for Medicine Hat. He's been combining very nicely with the more skilled elements there on that team, including Gavin McKenna, who's been, of course, one of the more dynamic players in the entirety of junior hockey worldwide this campaign, over 2 points a game this season. And Ryder Ritchie is starting to catch up to speed in terms of being able to match McKenna's intelligence and creativity in the offensive zone. There were moments this season where I've watched those two on the ice together where Ritchie seemed a beat behind, also especially in terms of the puck handling, which shines so brightly at lower paces but falls apart at higher speeds, was a bit of a problem alongside McKenna. But I've been seeing that improve with Ryder Ritchie. There's a lot of skill with this player, a really hard shot. It's a constant threat, especially when he's able to get to the more dangerous areas in the middle of the slot, which has been a more regular occurrence in my recent viewings here as well. So a player I think Minnesota Wild fans can be excited for, but remains a project here for maybe 3 or 4 year outlook. He's going to need some time. He's still quite raw, but the raw skill and the potential with this player is a really, really exciting thing here for fans of the Minnesota Wild. But that wraps up the show here for us today. If you want to read the article on which this episode was based, it is linked in the description down below, written by my colleague and former co-host, Hattie Kalikesh. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. We always appreciate our everydayers here on the podcast. And for your second listen of the day, you can head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything you need to know to build yourself the most competitive and sustainable fantasy roster. And if you're watching on YouTube, please do leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about the episode. What are your thoughts on these players? And who do you think stood out in your own viewings across the past week of performances? But that wraps things up here for us today. Thank you so much for listening. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I hope to catch you tuning in again very, very soon.